we cannot control the circumstances of our life. We cannot control the outside world, the pandemic. You cannot control that. But what we can control is how we react, right? Our attitude is a choice. Our energy is a choice. How we show up every single day is a choice. So if you choose, they say 98% of people live life by default. They let life happen. And to your point, they have these diseases or these ailments, or they're overweight, and they blame their circumstances and waiting for their life to change. But the reality that I have learned, that if you want the next 30 days to not look like the last 30, the one thing that needs to change is you.
Welcome to the CoachMD Podcast. I'm Dr. Charles Glassman, bringing you 3 decades of experience as a physician and a coach. Join us as we navigate the maze of medical advice with real-life stories, empowering you to take charge of your health. In our That Happens segment, guests share transformative experiences, reminding us that we're all human and not just patients. So get ready for a journey into healthcare reimagined, where empowerment and discovery pave the way. Hey, it's Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD. In my over 30 years of medical practice, I made it my goal to help people create strong minds, healthy bodies, and unshakable spirits. And as I launched the CoachMD podcast, I like to have on my program people who really embody this mind, body, and spirit. Because when people used to come to me as a physician, they know that they were coming to someone who realizes that a doctor's visit, more often than not, is due to lifestyle choices or emotional issues. And when I say emotional issues, that means life in general. That means difficulty. That means mindset challenges. And my guest today, David Atkins, has a great story to tell. And David, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you.
Yeah, I really
absolutely. I'm excited to be here, and I love your opening already.
Yeah. So, everyone has a story, and that brings them to where they are now. When someone came into my practice, for instance, my office, they'd have a story to tell. I always wanted to hear that story. So if you could kind of just share a little bit about yourself with the audience, I really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. So I always like to say, most important, I'm a married father of 3 daughters, and to my wife, I'm a girl dad. People used to joke, Dave, are you going to go for a son? I'm like, no, I'm done. 3 girls, I'm good. But I'm a retired New York State police captain. I was a New York State trooper for 22 years. I was a first responder on 9/11. When I retired, as the captain, I ran all state police operations for Westchester County, and it was a busy place. The Hudson Valley TMC, which you may be familiar with, Doc, we handled like 400,000 to 500,000 911 calls would come in and funnel through the TMC where my office was. So I had an amazing career there. And parallel to that, though, my last 10 years with the New York State Police, while working full-time, part-time at night, I actually built $1 million direct sales business with a health and wellness company called Beachbody. You may have heard of them.
Yeah,
sure. People P90X, right?
Absolutely.
People mess up PX90. But I originally just did it, and I'm sure we'll dive into this, just to get a little bit more, healthy and fit, the grind of police work. So my wife and I did that for the last, it started in the year 2000 just to get healthy and fit. But at the same time, I was 6 figures in debt at time, Doc, for just poor choices early on in my marriage. Just not really, whether it's student loans, credit cards, buying a boat I shouldn't have bought, and just charging my way in my younger years. And my wife and I, when we were on this journey to get healthy and fit, we were also on the journey to pay off our debt. And we had no idea that there was a business opportunity with the parent company called Beachbody. It was a direct sales company. And I'll tell you, as we will talk about mindset, everybody told me when I said, I think I'm going to try this business, everybody was like, it's not going to work. It's a pyramid scheme. Why are you wasting your time? It was a lot of naysayers, which I've learned to deal with. But I kind of had the vision and went all in and built it to a business that in 2 years we paid off the 6 figures in debt. And then I had an international team I led of 1,400 people internationally, and that opened the door. And I like to say, for me, being a man of faith, that, God revealed a gift to me I didn't know I had, which was to speak, because they started having me speak at their conferences. And it started with 20 people in the local library where I live. And every time I shared, they're like, David, would you speak to this group of 100, then 1,000? Then I was speaking to 20,000 people in the NFL Superdome. And that's when I had executives in my ear were like, David, you have a gift. Have you ever thought of being a keynote speaker? I'm like, a keynote speaker. I run the county with the state police. I have 3 daughters. I have this business. No way, right? But I took that leap of faith in 2020 into 21. And I retired right after my highlight, I was the incident commander for the U.S. Open in golf, which was in Westchester County in 2020. But it was also during a rough time in New York with ground zero of COVID being in New Rochelle. And I had the first national testing site, but I retired in 2021. And now the last couple of years, I published my first book in 2022, The Leveled Up Life, which was just the principles of success that I learned through that journey, which I think we could dive into with mindset. And then, which led me to where I am now, the One Decision Away philosophy that's publishing on July 15th. So here I am. I know that was an earful. We can break it down.
Oh,
but
I love
that's kind of my journey.
Oh, I love it. I really, I love it. And, when you say that, about how, people say, oh, you had a good job and you were, making good money. How could you be in debt? But the fact of the matter is when you're young, okay, and you were younger then, and as I know, when you're young and you start making a little bit of bread, right?
You start spending and eating more bread.
And you don't think about it. And then you start having kids and a family. And I know, for myself, I was in practice in the 1990s, and my practice was growing. It was swelling, and we were hiring doctors and hiring nurse practitioners, and then managed care was starting to kind of get a real grip on us. And we had just built a new house, and we had our third and fourth children, which were twins, and all of a sudden, so here we had one of our biggest clients or payers was Aetna, U.S. Healthcare.
Okay. Yeah.
And so U.S. Healthcare, we had a big practice, and we were making, a good amount of retainer money from them because they pay what's called a capitation fee, where they pay us a set fee per patient, per head, whether we saw them or not. And that monthly check was quite nice, and it would help us pay our staff and pay ourselves. And we were doing well. And then all of a sudden, after we built the house, my twins were born. They come in like a year later, and the local director of Aetna comes in with the medical doctor who's on staff there. They invite us upstairs to have a conference, and they say, we have some really good news for you. You're going to be able to bill your EKGs and your breathing tests. And when I say capitation, that was all inclusive. So if someone came into our practice, they didn't pay us anything but a copay, and Aetna would pick up the rest, whether we did an EKG or we didn't bill them. They just paid monthly no matter what. But now they're excited. You can bill for those. So you could actually be an entrepreneur. So first of all, I didn't look at that as being an entrepreneur. That's not my idea of an entrepreneur, that I could bill my patients more for these procedures. And second, what that meant was they were cutting, and then they said, and we're going to lower your capitation rate by 50%. So we can't do enough EKGs or enough breathing tests to cover that, So I had to make a change, and my change, and I've told this a million times, I won't take the time up in this podcast to do it, but I changed from a regular fee-for-service insurance-based practice to what's called a concierge practice in 2002, and became the ninth, my partner at the time came the 10th and 11th docs in the country to do that, and the first in New York, the first 2 in New York State to do that.
Oh, wow.
So that was a big risk. That was in 2002. So, I mean, what you're talking about, which I want to delve into, because this has a lot to do with health and well-being.
Yeah.
Now, you looked at it from a physical standpoint, and you did the beach body, which turned into something much more. So, I talk about mind, body, and spirit. And as you talk about, we'll talk a lot about this, because I have a deep faith myself and believe in what the gifts that God has given all of us, and that most of us don't, unfortunately, allow that to go into have take hold, and
Right.
people like you who are helping people to realize their gifts and talents, skill
Mm,
sets that are given from the day they were born.
mm,
And so I'd like to go into that a little bit and
yeah.
tell me a little bit about how you handle somebody, let's say, who I would see in my practice, someone with chronic pain or
Mm,
chronic diseases who define themselves by their illness, and they get
mm.
into this vicious cycle where they go to work, they come home, they're with the chronic pain, with the chronic illness, maybe they go on disability. They're just in this stuck in
This
this
vicious
circle,
cycle.
this
But
vicious cycle. Yeah.
there's so much to you gave me so much to unpack there.
Right.
So I think I should start off and say this. The David Atkins I am now is not the David Atkins I was 15 years ago. I went through a serious growth journey to
Mm,
see things the way I do right now.
yeah.
That's number one, right? Everybody has their chapter one, and you can't compare to somebody else's chapter 12. So I always start with now. When I speak on stages, I say, listen, we cannot control the circumstances of our life. We cannot control the outside world, the pandemic. You cannot control that. But what we can control is how we react, right? Our attitude is a choice. Our energy is a choice. How we show up every single day is a choice. So if you choose, they say 98% of people live life by default. They let life happen. And to your point, they have these diseases or these ailments, or they're overweight, and they blame their circumstances and waiting for their life to change. But the reality that I have learned, that if you want the next 30 days to not look like the last 30, the one thing that needs to change is you.
Hmm.
So for me, when it was starting out with exercise, that really, the byproduct was getting healthy and fit, Doc. The main thing for me was I became less stressed. I had more energy. My wife and I were in a better position with our marriage because we were in a better place. Like I like to say, my family, my wife and the kids deserve the best of me, not what's left of me. And when I started exercising, it positively impacted how I was a state trooper. It positively impacted how I was as a father and husband. And ultimately, it gave me more energy to handle what life throws at you. So I love that when you say mind, body, spirit, because the exercise for me positively impacted my mind and my spirit, so that was a big piece of it. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense
Yeah.
because without one, you can't have the other, and
No.
that's why me as a doctor, it was very frustrating to me at times, especially in my previous practice. It was a blessing, and it was
Yeah.
God's blessing that I had to go through what I went through so
Right.
that I could change my practice,
Mm.
because it gave me really time to spend with people to really focus on what their life was really about, and
Mm.
also not letting any of those the components go, the mind,
Mm.
the
Right.
body, and the spirit. That's You have the body, and most docs are just concerned about that,
Right.
whereas the mind and the spirit, and I mean, I know you know this because I read it in some of what you've written about how understanding that there's something greater than ourselves. And when you
Totally.
allow that and allow that humility, that opens the door to a great spirit.
Mm.
And but without the components of the mind, you can't get to that point a lot of times. And if you don't
Nope.
have a healthy body, it sets you up in this endless circle
You got it.
of biochemical reactions that totally put a block in that. And so,
No.
yeah,
Totally. I mean, and for me, you got to be intentional every day. It was exercise. And then I've also incorporated, like, and I'll share with you every single day, it's at least 10 minutes a day of a good personal development, book, because the reality is most people go to this as soon as they wake up, right? And I like
yeah,
to say this is somebody else's agenda. Your cell phone is somebody else's agenda. Most people wake up, they go right to their inbox. They're immediately in reactive mode. They're overwhelmed. And for me, like the night before, do not disturb goes on. My notifications are off. I wake up. I do meditation, which I used to laugh and mock. That's that,
woo woo
this
stuff.
crazy stuff, woo-woo stuff. But for me to sit and learn to just even listen to guided breathing has helped me where in the state police career are times you feel stressed. My subconsciously, I catch myself, I slow my breathing down, which lowers your heartbeat, right? We all know those things. So I've learned meditation. I read a good 10 minutes a day of a good personal development book, or listen, even if it's in the car. I like to say, make your car a mobile university. Don't be stuck on the news all the time, because that plays into your mindset, right? If all you do is consume the news today, no matter what side of the political fence you're on, no matter what, you're going to think the world is ending because it's sensationalism, right? So I'm very intentional with my morning routine, which is exercise, which is meditation, and is personal development. And like I said earlier, the person I am now has been a growth of reading hundreds of books and making these habits like brushing my teeth. And it was not easy early on because it's hard to break out of that cycle. But I realized from reading these books how much more I was able to grow and improve my life mentally, spiritually, and physically by incorporating all those areas.
Yeah. Well, David, I just have to say, okay, now
Yeah.
there was stress on your job
Yeah, right.
really? So,
I know.
so people don't realize, okay, they only see it from their end. Okay. So
Right.
when you see that flashing light in your rearview mirror, okay,
Right.
as the person who's not the police officer, your heart is pounding, obviously,
Right.
because the our primitive nature has programmed us that we have to be on the alert 24/7 for danger. And
Right.
when that
Right.
danger occurs, the fight or flight happens. So when you see a police officer in your rearview mirror, our heart is pounding. But
Right.
you don't realize that the police officer also,
Right.
they don't
Right.
know it's the unknown, what they're
Right.
coming into, and the
Right.
unknown triggers that same fight or flight. So
Absolutely.
what you're talking about, modalities of trying to temper that
Mm,
response, that reaction,
absolutely.
really, it's not a
Abs-
response, it's an automatic reaction, allows you and to be more mindful when you're
mm,
walking up to, and truly mindful. So you're not
right.
reacting, you're mindful. You know that the true possible dangers, not the imaginary ones.
Hmm.
Whereas the person in the car is just, dreaming up all the imaginary ones, unless
Hmm.
they're a true criminal, and
Right.
then
Right.
they're, whatever. But yeah.
No, it's just stress. And I, the shift work, the overtime, like when I started, and the reality is that I part of exercise, I was an ocean lifeguard growing up through college, stayed fit. But the reality is when you're a parent, and I think for anybody listening, you're a parent, you have a job, you're gonna have stress, right? And having a parent, I started gaining weight, the shift work with the state police. When you work those rotating shifts, you're not making the best, choices to eat. You're probably running through the fast food thing. It piles up, and the compound effect. And eventually, like, I was 20 pounds heavier than I was now. And I finally was like, all right, something needs to change. My paycheck to paycheck, we're in debt. I'm exhausted all the time.
Mm.
And it was like having that light bulb moment, but it was also taking ownership. I think that's the big thing. You know, when you finally take ownership of your life, I truly believe you stop giving power of your life over to somebody else. And that could be people's opinions of you, that could be your circumstances of life, anything. So once I took like extreme ownership of my life, I said, all right, I control how I show up in the 24 hours today. And I am a product of the choices and decisions I made up into this point, right? We all been through tough times. So it's how I react. So I finally took ownership and was intentional to do the things that you're aware, I'm aware, and learn, so that when I am dealing with stress in life, I can handle it in a much better way, physically, mentally, and spiritually.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
it's all about going from a victim mindset to a
To a victor.
victor mindset, and you
Right.
you know that transition, and being a police officer all these years, you know that the people who you have to arrest and you have to protect the general public from are those people who have deeply dysfunctional
Mm,
homes growing up.
right.
I mean, it's not an argument.
Mm,
And so they people call it generational, and that they don't have any. They start out from behind, and it's true. They do start out from behind.
mhm.
However, you have a choice, and I'd like you to kind of address the idea that a lot of people will come to you, I'm sure, as they did to me, with very hard histories, very
Mm,
deeply embedded generational kind of trauma. And when I say generational trauma, some people and many doctors will say, oh, it's in your genes. You have to take a medication to correct it. And I've always gone against that. Most of it is just learned behavior that's passed along through the generations. And true, there are what are called epigenetic changes that occur. Those are the ways that and that to me, and that's why people use that as an example of generational curse and that sort of thing. But I look at those changes that are possible as generational possibilities. And so you're not, you don't have to be a victim of your childhood, of your circumstances, that you could change that. So with that in mind, kind of, and with your police experience, share that with us, your observations about how people who are deeply broken from their circumstances in life and how those people can change.
Yeah, I love that because, and it makes me think of the police never get called to a good situation. So you're constantly flooded with that. And when I would deal with people like that and people say exactly that, it was my dad, my family, my household. No matter which way, the perspective, the way I saw it is this: we are all a product of our environment, right? They actually say you make the income of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So early on, like when I was looking to go on this journey to grow and earn more income and do the things that I did, somebody once told me, and this is what I pay forward, is that my mentors were because people like David, but I don't have people close in my family I can go to. I don't have that stable household. And I say to them, what was said to me was, the authors of the books that you read and what you consume become your mentors from afar. And when I heard that, I said, I got it. And when I started reading books by like John Maxwell or Brendan Burchard or Darren Hardy, and infiltrating my mind with this stuff, it changed the way I thought. It changed the way I handled my life and showed up every single day. And that was the secret sauce. Like, I feel the personal growth journey is the secret sauce. And most people just kind of, I say, accept their life for what it is instead of leading their life to where they want to go, right? And even now, where I am always trying to level up. Who's the next circle of people that I can learn from and grow? And what can I pick up here? I'm still growing and still learning. So I think somebody in that immediate area, it's you need to be intentional, number one, with how you show up. And number two is start finding the mentors, even if it's authors of books or you get stuff for free now with YouTube and podcasts. Listen to podcasts, find motivational videos on YouTube, and fill your brain with that. Because you could be the one to break the cycle, or in your family, because it's happened before. If somebody's done it once before, you could do it as well. And that means physically with the way you take care of your body and mentally. I'm a big believer in that. I may have not have come from my dad was in law enforcement. My parents went through a divorce. So I had tough times. I didn't come from a family where people getting arrested. But in the same way, my family, I'm the first one that went off and became this entrepreneur and did an unconventional thing per se. And I had to break my own cycle and grow my own mind by doing the same things that I would tell somebody that's on a smaller scale, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does. And I know you write a lot about comparison and looking at other people. And many people who have these terrible experiences, they look at other people and they say, oh, they had a privileged, whatever, upbringing, whatever. And what's really wrong about that is everybody has the same makings of what I call the primitive nature, or what have called the automatic brain, and our divine nature, that which God has touched in all of us equally. So if you go by that, we're all created in God's image, that's not you or me or that's everybody. That's everybody. Okay. Right. So you walk on the street and you're looking at people, well, they have God in them. They have God. I mean, everybody. I mean, so we all have that makeup, that general makeup. So somebody, even the most privileged that you think upbringing, the way that primitive nature that we have, that programming is going to interpret it, is going to be as bad as somebody who has even horrific, because it doesn't think. So what I mean is that the world is so big for an infant, and our brain stops processing mostly from birth to adolescence. So between that time period, the earth and our environment is so large, is so big, is so grandiose that our brain stores that and knows that things that are big could be threatening, could be dangerous. So, for instance, if you grew up in a quote perfect household, but you spill some milk and all of a sudden your mother says, "Oh, you stupid idiot, you're so clumsy,"
Right.
whatever, and you're 5 years old, believe it or not, that
That means
sticks.
a lot.
Okay.
Right.
And you may think that, okay, well, there's no abuse there, there's no drugs, no, but it doesn't matter.
It
That
still affects
person,
them.
yeah, and that's a quote perfect household. And,
Mm.
and a lot of people may say who are on the victim train, oh, that's nothing compared to what I have. But if
Mm.
you could just speak a little bit about to the dangers of comparison and the
Oh.
dangers of using, when you say people pick up their phone and they're looking at other people's life or agenda, how
Mm.
does that influence that victim, get you kind of locked in that place? And
Oh.
how do you address this a little bit? These are big questions. How do
No,
you
this
address
is
that a
great.
little bit with the book that your new
Oh,
book?
there's so much here. I mean, the first, you always hear comparison's a thief of joy. I say this and I say this on stage, and I think I need to repeat it twice because it's so important. People need to hear. Do not compare the highlight reel you see on social media to your everyday life. Because, and I'll say it again, do not compare the highlight reel you see on social media to your everyday life, because most people on social media are making out that their life is perfect, and that's not true.
Hmm.
Not many people are willing to be vulnerable. And I've learned that vulnerable is the connection to empowering people. And for me, and it took a lot to share, even 5, 6 years ago, I wouldn't share the stuff I share now. I will share on stage now a time that, and I'll share this story that when I was between lieutenant and captain, and my business wasn't doing so well. And because our business did what it did, my wife was home. She was a school teacher, but we retired her, or she resigned early because now she's with our kids. Business was doing really bad. I was training the incoming lieutenant with undercover units I used to run. They had me running the county at the same time. So I was like the interim captain. My wife was away at a conference for our company. And then they called me, my daughter's school called me and said they think my one daughter broke her wrist and you have to take her to the ER. Doc, I found myself from stress that night, dry heaving from stress. And I talk about it. It took a lot of courage. And that's what I talk about. We all have fear in our life, but we all can have a little bit of courage to pick the phone up and just ask for some help. And going through therapy. And I share I did, because I truly believe that it's okay if you struggle. We all struggle. And I think people even think, oh, David, I can't believe you're sharing that. A New York State Police captain and this, your therapy. I am so past worrying about what other people think, because I am at a point in my life that if one person can hear my message and know that I struggle too, and it's okay to ask for help, then you need to do that. And that's a vulnerable thing for me to share. But I do that because there is this persona. People say, David, I can't believe you built this business or you speak to 1,000 people. No, I've been doing this for 15 years. I did it for 10 years for Beachbody for free. What you're seeing is a 14-year journey. It's not an overnight success. And people on social media are not willing to be vulnerable and have their struggles. And I think that's really important. People think that life is perfect. And the only person you should compare yourself, and for me, is I compare myself to the version I was yesterday. How
Mm.
can I be better a person than I was today than I was yesterday? That's it. Because comparing yourself to anybody else, and I said in the opening, comparing your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 12 and playing victim mentality will never get you out of that hole at all.
Yeah.
So that's like a lot of how I share with that.
Yeah, and I think it's beautiful. One of my favorite sayings, and this is what I mean, David, that we're kindred spirits. One of my favorite sayings that I have lived by is vulnerability is my greatest asset.
Yeah,
And I
that's
came
so
across
true.
that. I came across it because about 10 years ago, more 10 years ago, I have to, now that I'm getting older, when I say 10 years ago, it's really like 15 or 20 years ago. Well,
Right.
I remember when I started writing, a patient came into my office and said that he felt really good with his, when he sat with me and talked for, 30, 45 minutes or whatever, but then he'd go back into his life and it would fall apart. Was there something I could do to kind of bridge those office visits to keep him motivated? So I started with this weekly message that I started writing, and I realized that it was really more motivational than it was medical, because he
Yeah.
was a diabetic and he wasn't eating well and wasn't lifestyle choices were poor. So I was encouraging, and then I started sending it to more and more patients because I thought it could help them. And as I did that, that became my therapy. And I personally did myself also go through therapy when I
Right.
first became a doctor, because I was kind of blown away being a doctor. Like me, a doctor, I grew up in a very modest home, and doctors were put up on this pedestal. I could not believe, now they call it the imposter syndrome. They didn't have a name for it back then, but that's what I was suffering from. And so
Yeah.
I had to go through therapy, not had to, it was the best thing I did, go
Right.
through therapy in my early 30s. And that gave me a much better sense of who
Mm,
I was. And
mm,
so when I started doing these weekly emails, I realized I needed to kind of dig into myself and look, the things that are happening in my life and how I'm handling them and what makes
mm,
me nervous or fearful or whatever. And I would share that and be very vulnerable. And I realized that people, and especially my patients, would be more willing to open up to me.
it's amazing.
And I took off my white coat. I
Yeah.
didn't wear my white coat anymore,
Right.
because that doctors, people don't realize, they fear vulnerability. And
Mm,
that's one of the reasons why they hide behind that white coat,
mm.
So
Yeah, I love it's vulnerability is your best asset. It's so true. Most people aren't willing to be vulnerable. It takes a lot and a lot of growing, but you realize the biggest impact you make with people is when you are,
yeah.
you
And
know.
I saw in one of your videos something very personal that you shared about somebody, your best friend, who
Mm,
died in the line of duty,
yeah.
and I know that that's a very difficult topic for you, and I know it choked you up and probably
Yeah.
still does, because it's so profound. It's not fake, it's not phony, it's real, it's
Yeah.
raw, and you saw the audience how they respond to that,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
want to know that you're normal.
Right.
They,
No, absolutely. And I really drive home my saying with that is, life doesn't always fire a warning shot. And so often when it comes to our goals and our dreams and the things we want to do, we all talk about we'll do when we have more time or we're less busy or in the summer when my kids are out of school, or now people will say when my kids go back to school, like they'll find something. And my reality is that you may not be here tomorrow. All we get is the 24 hours in a day, because 2 weeks before my best friend was shot and killed in the line of duty with the state police, we were on the phone joking around about our family trip to the Outer Banks we were going to
mm,
take together. And 2 weeks later, I was in the ER, literally crying on my knees over his dead body and like, what just happened? And my point with that, and it's one of my main things, and I hit it on it in the book, is living a life with urgency, and that's simply not procrastinating, because we only get one shot at this, and we don't know when our last day is going to be. So for me, that story I share to kind of empower people to not take life for granted, because every day is a blessing and a gift.
yeah. And as you said before, all you can control is yourself and your
Correct.
own personal journey.
Yeah.
And when we get so overwhelmed with what's going on in the news and the
Mm.
world and what we see on social media, and I'm not only talking about the news, I'm talking, like you said, the highlight reel, and we
Oh,
get overwhelmed. And how could they do this? How could they go on all these trips when I'm struggling with this and that, and we just get so overwhelmed. And it's important to take a step back, like you've
mm.
said, and know that you live your own journey, but then
Right.
you know, you got to give it up to a higher power at some
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
because,
Yeah. Yep.
otherwise,
Yeah,
it's,
you're gonna. I talk about it in my book. There comes a certain point in your life when, if you did everything you needed to do, you got to surrender it to God, for me. And that's been, listen, everybody was against me retiring from the state police when I was a captain, people said you're crazy. Like and I should also say this. I had an unbelievable career. The New York State Police. It was an amazing journey. It was an amazing journey. I love the people. I love the job. I have no ill will, but I had that tug in my heart, of I think I have a bigger purpose and calling to be a speaker. And it was again the same thing that happened when I said I'm going to build a network marketing business. People like, you're crazy. You're going to get promoted to major. Like, why are you doing that? But I felt that, I've heard and I've read struggles less painful than regret. And I knew if I didn't at least give it a chance to do this, that I may regret it later on. And when we talked about our gifts opening up, everybody has gifts. I believe everybody has God-given gifts, and your gifts are the things you do best with the least amount of effort. And it's different for everybody. My wife is gifted as a cook. I can barbecue and make pancakes. That's about it. She is that's her gift. And she has a business where she cooks for people. Like my gift, when I realized with speaking, it didn't, and my one decision away, the whole point with that is that when you make the one pressing decision of what's in front of you, and it's different for everybody, life will reveal to you what's next. And my one pressing decision early on was my wife and I were in a bad place. We need to start taking care of our health and our finances. And we did that. And that one decision led to the business. And that one decision revealed this gift of speaking that came to me. And then that led me to people getting in my ear. And literally I say, if I did not take care of my health and talk to my wife back then, I wouldn't be standing on this stage today, or in this case, be talking to you on this podcast.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that. If the one pressing decision in your life maybe is I need to take care of my relationship, or maybe somebody else, it's your health, that does not mean that that's only taking care of your health, because my one decision to take care of my relationship and finances led me through all these other aspects of my life. So it's a matter of, if you have gifts, the thing you do best with the least amount of effort. For me, it was like, I need to embrace this calling and lean in. And back to what we were saying, surrender to God. Like, your gifts will make room for you, right? I think that's a Bible quote, and I went for it. And even now, at times, I'm always saying, all right, I did what I can, and everything else is in His hands.
Yes, what you're talking about, I think of my own decisions, those decisions I made, and back in 2002, in March of 2002, there were 2 consecutive Mondays where I left the office, one day almost in tears, and the next Monday in tears, literally in tears, crying. And a couple days later, a New England Journal article, a New England Journal edition came on my desk, and it had an article about this idea of concierge practices. And I had never heard of them before, but I was so overwhelmed by the stress and pressure of what was going on that I decided to call the number. I thought I was calling a private practice, but it turned out it was a company, and the company was starting out transitioning these practices into concierge practice. And what a concierge practice is, basically patients pay a retainer fee and you're their personal doctor, and it's not insurance based. So make a long story short, 10 months later, on November 11th, 2002, we rolled out our concierge practice. That night we had a gathering for all the people who joined that practice. Now, keep in mind that my practice with my associate was arguably the biggest 2-man practice in Rockland County. So we had probably 15,000 files, patients. Wow. We would see 40 to 50 patients a day. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
So at that reception, there were 50 people.
Wow.
Okay. I left that I could cry now thinking about it. I left that go, and I had to see a patient in the hospital that night, crying, saying to God, what did I just do?
Right.
I had 4 children under the age of 9. I just couldn't. And so that night when I went to sleep, I remember, I was sharing a little bit with my wife, but basically telling God, I said, God, I trust you, it's in your hands. And I went to sleep.
Yeah.
Luckily, not luckily, with the grace of God, but it didn't happen overnight either. I remember
No.
3 months later having a conversation with the company saying, if things don't turn around, I'm going to be bankrupt by the summer. But,
Yeah.
you know, I'll save long stories, but I made that decision. I did everything I could, and
Mm.
then I just left it into God's hands.
I totally love it. And I talk
Yeah.
about that right there. You got to surrender. Eventually, you just got to, that I heard yesterday somebody said, let go, let God.
Yeah.
And I love that. I'm like, that's very, very true. And I totally believe in the same wavelength, 100%.
Yeah, yeah. So, I know that those decisions, just one decision at a time, if you
Mm.
don't make those decisions, like people will poo-poo the idea of God or how's God in this horrible world and, where's God and all that. And that's for another conversation, which we,
Conversation, right?
we could have for a long time. But, you know, if you could kind of give us just a few pointers
Mm.
how that affects your ability to the not doing these things will
Mm.
affect your access to that spiritual part and how the things you can do. And what I love about your new book is that every time you put something out there, you have action steps to take. And so tell us how those action steps can take you closer to having that faith and having that ability to surrender to a higher power.
No, I remember reading, and I got to say, John Maxwell said it. He said, once you find your why, you find your way. So for me, like it started with finding a strong why to take those steps to move forward. Because if it's just about ourselves, at a certain point, we all will hit something that's a lot tougher than us. And more times than not, people will quit because you don't have that driving force for why you do what you do. So for me, when you have a why, and I talk about you have to have a strong why. And for me and my wife and kids, and now my why is even bigger. I want people I speak to hear my message to help them. That's what drives me in the hard time. And then in terms of the action steps, so often we wait to have everything figured out before we start, right?
Mm.
And I actually have learned, and it's motivation too. We wait for motivation to start. But I have learned that if you start, you then start feeling motivated. And if you start, you then figure out what to do. It's kind of like whether writing this book, this second book I did, like I had this idea and it started with, well, don't just start putting stuff down on paper. People like, how did you come up with it? Well, I literally started brain dumping ideas on the paper. And once I did that, the next day I was like, oh, wow, look, these look like these could be the chapters of my book. So the action steps, I think so often we wait to have everything in order. And no, for me, it's have the driving force in your life, have a strong why, and then take that first step. And then if it's not God, then maybe it's the universe or spirituality, whatever it is. Have faith that life's going to reveal to you and it will come to you and what to do next. And it's, so often in life, it may not make sense when you're going through it, but I think every single person listening or watching this can look back at all of the things they've been through up into this point, and it all makes sense why it happened now.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think like the struggle, oh my God, you're going to leave the state police, you crazy. But now looking back, like, no, it put me in this position now to write this other book and to impact thousands of people. And that wouldn't have happened. And it doesn't make sense while you're going through it at times. It doesn't. But you have to have faith in whatever it is you believe in, right? I'm not to tell somebody you can't have a different religion, but I do believe that you got to let go sometimes. Stop waiting for things to be perfect. Have a strong why. Make that first step. Don't let the start stop you, which has happened to so many people, and keep going because your success rate up into this point is 100% because you survived every decision and choice and thing you made up to this point because you're still here, right? So take that next step, have a strong why, don't wait for the motivation, and then life will reveal to you what's next.
Yeah, yeah, that's so powerful, and yeah, you don't know what things mean, and you ask yourself, would I have gone through if I had the choice? Would I have gone through what I went through? And the answer most of the time is no.
Right.
I don't want to relive that. I mean, I
No.
remember that. Oh my goodness, that was tough.
Yeah.
But wouldn't trade it in a million years because that's our individual journey.
Right.
David, look, like I said, we're kindred spirits. We don't live that far from each other. We definitely got to stay in touch. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
really,
Absolutely.
It's very special. And
No,
I thank you so much. I'm looking so forward to the launch of your book.
thank you.
Tell us the name again. And
Yeah. So it's the One Decision Away philosophy. It drops July 15th. Everything will be on my website, David Atkins Speaks. So David Atkins, Atkins, speaks, speaks.com. And if you order the book on the 15th, primarily the 15th, but that week you're going to get 3 freebies, PDF guides, like action guide workbooks, book to club discussion guide. And then I'm doing a ton of raffles and prizes where 3 $100 Amazon gift cards, a walking pad, a sports nutrition bundle. There is a ton of raffles that if you buy the book in that time frame, you will get entered to also win a raffle. So July 15th is the big day to get the book. And you can also find me anywhere on social media online.
looking forward to getting that book and
Yes.
Sharing your philosophy with others.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, David,
Thank
for coming
you,
on
Doc,
the
so much. Great
CoachMD
opportunity. Thank
podcast
you.
today. And until next time, I'm Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD, urging you to stay strong in mind, in body, especially right here in soul. Bye for now.